Many of us are aware of the story of The Boy Who Cried Wolf, a tale telling of a young shepherd boy who dishonestly cries out to his village for help, claiming there to be a wolf eating the sheep. When the villagers repeatedly come to the boy's aid, only to be met with the truth of the matter, that there is no wolf, their faith in his word wanes. One day, a wolf appears for real, but when the boy cries out, nobody comes to help, and the sheep, and sometimes, depending on the version of the story being told, the boy, are devoured. The lesson of this story is quite apparent. Nobody believes a liar, even if they're telling the truth. In some respects, lying serves a social purpose, whether that be for the sake of self-preservation in the face of an unreasonable party, whether it's to convince your toddler to eat the vegetable that they've literally never had before but have convinced themselves that they despise it with every fiber of their being, or whether it simply be in sparing someone's feelings. However, when a person lies for an extended period of time, especially frivolously or selfishly, it becomes harder and harder for anyone to trust a single thing that they have to say. This story is meant to impart upon children the danger of such inconsiderate actions and how it could result in dire, unforeseen consequences, not only for others, but also for themselves. Yet it is not a story that everybody takes to heart. Meet Geraldine Fernandez Ruiz, a graphic designer who was the talk of the proverbial town in Barranquilla, Colombia in January 2024. The community was buzzing with pride and delight after learning that one of their own, a Colombian, had been a part of the production of the Golden Globe award-winning animated film The Boy and the Heron, produced by Studio Ghibli. With the film swiftly approaching its theatrical release in Colombia and on the cusp of turning that nomination into a full-blown award, Geraldine was all too happy to excitedly share her accomplishments from her time as a part of the production. She detailed how while working on her degree, she had been told that her illustration style was very similar to that seen in Studio Ghibli productions. She talked of the 3 different times during the process that she got to meet director Hayao Miyazaki and how he had affectionately nicknamed her the Colombian. She spoke of her extensive contributions in the form of single-handedly drawing 25,000 frames for the opening scene and the rest of the film, as well as the NDA she signed that ultimately left her excluded from the film's international credits. Certainly anyone can recognize not only the depths of Geraldine's passion, but also that she was, potentially, unfairly taken advantage of, to spend so much time on a film that she might not receive any credit for. After all, this isn't the 1940s where animation jobs were taken with shame and purposely left off of a person's resume. Animation is a well-respected and beloved medium in filmmaking. Yet through all of that, Geraldine happily returned to her daily job, simply content with the nature of her contribution and being allowed the opportunity to be a part of a property and industry that she had so much respect for. Truly a case study for humility. Now, what if I said that everything I just told you was a lie? Buckle up, my little sticklebacks, for this is the tale of La Niña y la Farsa. Opening animation, drink some water. Keep your throat moist. Well, hi-ho, hello, what's the dealio? You know, foolishly, I expected people to stop coming up with such grandiose lies when the internet provided the ever-present risk of them being called out for it. Yet, on a surprisingly regular basis, I hear stories of people telling such tales only to be met with the consequences of their actions as if they were a stranger. It's one thing for a 12-year-old to make up what they think sounds enough like Japanese words to pretend like they can speak the language, but it's a whole other ballpark for an adult in their 30s to lie about being a part of a project that they had nothing to do with. With artists especially, I feel as though this carries a heavier weight, because if you lie as an artist, then not only do you destroy people's faith in your word, but also that of your work. An artist producing the work of another under the pretense of it being their own can no longer be trusted in the authenticity of their own work. Once again, this behavior makes more sense in children because they lack the foresight for consequences like, how can I survive as an artist if nobody trusts that the work I create is actually made by me? Something to keep at the back of your mind as we're going through this is that I was having to piece a lot of this story together from various different sources, not all of which had the same or even moderately useful information, and which was almost all in a different language. There's a plethora of Spanish language videos on the matter, but unfortunately, yo no hablo español con permiso. So firstly, let's give a big old thanks to my translator, Say, who, while I was able to piece together aspects of the situation from auto translations, very kindly gave me a more accurate translation of what I felt were the most notable parts of the interviews. I felt a more comprehensive English language rundown of the situation might be appealing to my artistically inclined viewers, who also need that long-form content because while I initially tried to make this video a half hour, you guys know me, I'm entirely incapable of doing that, so I hope you enjoy it. In January 2024, Geraldine Fernandez Ruiz was a graphic designer working for Tecnoglass in Barranquilla, Colombia. But if you asked her, she would say that she was also something else. An illustrator for the Studio Ghibli film The Boy and the Heron. Yes, I said illustrator, not animator. That was on purpose. The way that Geraldine told the story, not only was this an inspirational case of a woman traveling overseas to earn her degree and then being capable enough to maintain work in that field remotely after returning home, but also a cautionary tale over the potential of being exploited by suspicious contracts. See, one aspect of Geraldine's story was that before starting work on the film, she had signed a non-disclosure agreement, one that would have barred her from openly discussing various aspects of the film's production. This contract was also, apparently, what removed her name from the credits of the film. One would assume that the NDA then prevented her from publicly or privately drawing attention to that detail. Despite that, Geraldine was seemingly able to work around that limitation when she spoke at a meeting of illustrators at Sergio Arboleda University. In October of 2023, she was invited to speak at a workshop for upcoming student animators, and it was specifically the work that she claimed as her own present in The Boy and the Heron being cited when doing so. From the outside, this looked like a woman who had effectively been taken advantage of in her first, rather successful foray into animation, denied rightful credit for the hard work that she put into the production. This was made all the more disappointing given that Geraldine spoke about how she had been injured as a result, developing what she referred to as a crooked hand from the grueling, unrelenting hours of illustrative work, as well as losing 15 kilograms during the course of the production. For all of you Americans out there, that's 33 pounds. You can only imagine, as word of her accomplishments flooded her community and place of work, why her friends and co-workers were then so impressed. So captivating was her story, in fact, that on January 14th, the Colombian news publication El Heraldo ran an article on her, which was soon to be followed by additional reports on El Tiempo and Infobay. However, within 24 hours, Geraldine's claims faced up against the scrutiny, broader community, and industry knowledge available from users online. And they did not hold up.
What happened?
Users on TikTok and Twitter were quick to point out not only the ludicrous nature of Geraldine's claims, but also the lacking evidence. Those more familiar with animation, and in particular this Ghibli production, were able to recognize inconsistencies in her story that contradicted known technical aspects of the film, the credits and skills present for the scenes that she claimed to have made, or even just how animation worked for films of its ilk. Almost like it was a story made up by someone who had no real experience working as an animator. When delving into her portfolio for insight on her illustrative skills, it was reported that multiple pieces were not in fact drawn by Fernandez, and had actually been lifted from Colombian ad campaigns, as well as off of websites like DeviantArt of all places, because it always comes back to the dweebians. On January 15th, Julieta Colas posted on her Twitter account, "This lady been saying she worked on The Boy and the Heron, says she personally drew 25,000 frames of the film on her own in Colombia, and that Miyazaki knew her name, calls herself an illustrator the entire time, never shows a single drawing, the balls to lie. There are Latin American women who are working in anime for reals. Me, I am one of them, actually in Japan, and working their asses off. I currently have a pretty bad injury myself to subtly have these grifters misinforming the hell out of everyone." This is what was on her portfolio, LinkedIn, and Instagram. She is a grifter. Let me reiterate. She is saying she personally illustrated, her words, 25,000 frames of the film. That is 35 minutes. A lady who makes bootleg planners in Colombia is claiming that she animated 35 minutes of a Ghibli feature as freelance remote work. She blocked me, by the way. You can see my work in Tengoku Daimakyo, Trigun Stampede, Season 2 of Ranking of Kings, and the upcoming Sandland show. My name appears on the respective episodes I participated on in the end credits if you want to check, because I am not a liar. But please watch Sandland. This same day, Geraldine was asked to come on stream to be interviewed by Spanish speaker and video game journalist Pablo Gonzalez, otherwise known as Keith Sith on Twitch. The interview lasted a little under an hour, during which Fernandez doubled down on her claims. Beyond that, she expanded more on what she claimed the process of working on the movie was like, which seemed to reveal that she didn't actually know very simple concepts within the industry, such as what storyboards were, nor their purpose in animated media. It seems very strange, right, that they hire you as an illustrator and not as an animator at a studio like Ghibli. It gives the impression that they are two completely different disciplines. I imagine they gave you some kind of class or basic structure on how to animate, how to do the frames. Well, for those in the know, a movie has 24 frames per second of animation, in this case, or in general, all cinema. It's not just a single drawing, unless the movie requires fewer frames, like Spider-Verse or something similar. But in general, it's 24 frames per second, 24 drawings per second. Of course, if you don't have knowledge of animation, how do you gain that experience? I mean, how do you gain the ability, let's say, to know exactly which frames cover 1 second? Well, if we talk about the experience outside of the studio, it's simply like, it is easy to create a script. You just create the story based on that story, you create the script, and with that, you start the whole process. So let's say that during university, during my postgraduates, and in my spare time when I was drawing or wanted to create a story, in this case, a comic or a manga or something like that, I would try to create a story or a script at the beginning, and then based on that script, I would work on the scenes. I mean, girl, we're not talking about comics. I know what you're talking about with regards to comics. This is not comics. So, for example, during university, during my postgraduates, and in my spare time, when I was drawing or I wanted to create a story, in my case, a comic or a manga or something like that, I would try to create a story or a script at the beginning, and then based on that script, I would work on the scenes. At Studio Ghibli, it was almost the same. They would give us a script and tell us, well, the Colombian gets the script from such and such time to such and such time. They would tell me what I needed to use, how I should use it, and which illustration style I would have to be using. Because there, we didn't only use pencils and colors, we used acrylics, watercolors, rapidographs, and Copic markers. All the techniques that existed, we used them all. When they told us what the style was and what they wanted, and most importantly, the timelines, that's when we started working. Every week we had to present our progress. We would do it through video calls because everything was done remotely. They would review each one and tell us, okay, fix this, change this, do this from scratch. Once everything was okay from a cursory glance, we would send it in boxes through mail or courier to Japan, and they would put it in a machine where they would combine all the frames. Once that was done, they would send it back digitized, and all of the digital corrections were made, which were very minimal, honestly. So, you're a person without experience in animation. With illustration, yes, but not in animation. How do you plan a scene like this, which is so unconventional when it comes to the animated part? Because it's like very image-based, like cutouts, you know? You can tell there's not a fluid animation, but more like jump, 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 jump. Was that in the script, or was that an artistic decision you made based on it? They tell you, at least in that script. It's set during World War II, Mahito's mother dies in a fire, he tries to save her, and all of that. And in parentheses, they tell us, illustration style this way, cuts at this point to this point, frames from here to here, style like this, like this. They give you detailed instructions on how they want it to come out, or how they want it to look, and from there they speak with the team about how it can be worked on, what can be worked on, how to do it, and that's when you start working on the scenes. That was one of the most difficult scenes, and they're just very open and very attentive to any doubts. So if I had a question, they'd ask me, they'd guide me, and they'd tell me how it was going, and they'd help out with the whole process. The very next day, on January 16th, Geraldine provided an additional interview on Colombian radio broadcast program Blue Radio, hosted by Nestor Morales. For anyone who watched these interviews back-to-back, whether that be separated by an hour or even the 24 hours between them when the initial reporting was taking place, the inconsistencies in Geraldine's claims become very apparent. One does not even need to be versed in animation as a medium to recognize them, given that her claims regarding her involvement and her answers to specific questions change between these two interviews. What initially started as quite bold claims regarding how she'd actually witnessed her name in the credits of the film when being interviewed by Keith Sith turned into excuses for why she wasn't included in the credits a literal day later. I want to ask, how was the experience of watching the movie after so many years of working on it? How was that first viewing, let's say, of the film? What did you feel? I cried. I can imagine. I cried like you wouldn't believe. The truth is, I was watching the movie in the early morning here because I was watching it on my computer with the whole team, and I was like, I can't believe I'm here. When the credits started rolling, I had the biggest crocodile tears, you have no idea. I didn't even think I would be in the credits, and when I saw my name, it was in Japanese, of course. When I saw my full name, because it's not just Geraldine Fernandez, but Geraldine Fernandez Ruiz, and then my full name appeared with Colombia in parentheses, I was like, this makes everything worth it. Okay, and if you were paid and participated in the movie, Geraldine, why doesn't your name appear in the credits? Well, let me put things into context. As far as I understand, there was a misunderstanding on the IMDb page. As far as I knew, or as I thought, only the people who were legally involved or who appeared in front of the movie were listed. And when I went to see it, clearly, I didn't appear. I asked, and they told me, you don't appear in the credits of the movie, like the post-credits of the cinema. When everything started happening in the media, I could search and verify, because there's another thing, I haven't seen the last 20 minutes of the movie and the post-credits. I watched the whole movie except for the last 20 minutes and the post-credits, so I didn't know where I was located. When I desperately asked the studio for help, all they did was send me a screenshot and told me that because I'm a foreigner, I'm part of the animation support houses that appear in the credits. There's Default, there's Totoro's house, if I'm not mistaken. They are animation houses from both the Western and Eastern world, and because I'm a foreigner, I'm part of that segment. That's why my name doesn't appear, but the name of the animation support house does. So that's where it gets complicated, because it's not that my name doesn't appear, it appears in another segment from another group. Having initially claimed to have drawn 25,000 frames and illustrated the opening sequence of the film on her own, okay, I wanted to ask you a little about the Ghibli topic. You were working there for 4 years on the movie, yeah? And which parts did you focus on in the film? Well, I focused a lot on the illustration part and in several scenes like the frames. To give you a spoiler, let's say the first part of the movie, almost the entire part of the movie, which is about 15 minutes, I did that scene myself. So literally, the Colombian opens the movie. I don't believe it. The scene of the fire? The fire, yes. That part is the best in the movie. I'm not saying that because you're here, but because I think it's a fantasy in terms of the visual abstraction, especially with all the flames. I think it's incredible. That part is yours? Well, yes. But yours alone? I won't even tell you how many frames it was because literally my room was filled only with that scene. My room got filled just with that scene. I'm freaking out, I can't believe it. You were the only one who worked on that scene? The one with the boy running out of the house with the fire? Damn. Yes, I swear, seriously. I thought there was an entire studio dedicated to that. You know, like a whole team dedicated solely to the abstraction of those images, because it's just insanely impressive. But by the time of the Blue Radio interview, Geraldine now claimed that while she was involved in the creation of a number of frames of that scene, she herself was not the sole artistic force behind them. Is it true that you drew 25,000 frames along with the team? Yes, because 25,000 frames is almost between 30 and 40 minutes of film. Keep in mind that 1 second of animation is 24 frames. 25,000 frames would be approximately 30 to 40 minutes of video. And along with the team, I worked on part of a couple scenes that consisted of 25,000 frames, but I didn't do all 25,000 frames. Despite this shift, during the Kate Sith interview, she did claim to have animated a whopping 30 to 40 minutes of this hour-and-a-half long movie on her own. And no benefit of the doubt can be given to the potential of a misunderstanding, as when Kate Sith asked for clarification on that claim, she confirmed as much. Okay, so you mentioned that you did the arrow scene. Are there any other scenes that you worked on? The forest part, the part where the heron goes with Mahito, and you see this pretty colorful forest, very beautiful. I did that one too. I did the fight between Mahito's father with the parrots, where the parrots appear. The part with the frog was done with a team. The part where Mahito's mother melts was also done with a group. The scene with the papers, where Mahito's mother says something like, "You shouldn't be here," I did that one alone. And many scenes in total. Between the ones I did alone and the ones I did in collaboration, I worked on between 15 and 20 scenes. How many minutes are we talking about roughly for all those scenes? Can you say? Around 40 minutes approximately. Wait. You're saying there were 240 people in this movie and you did a third of the movie? But like I said, some were done alone, others in collaboration. Each person did their own scenes. What happens is that keep in mind that some scenes are 3 seconds long, others are 15, 20, 10, or 20 seconds, so it really depended on the scene that I was working on. Yet when asked for further clarification in the Blue Radio interview on how much work she put into this movie, there was no feasible way to stretch the amount of work she was now claiming into 40 minutes. But Geraldine, you went to give a conference about a small, insignificant participation in a movie that doesn't have credits. With just 2 drawings, Geraldine, you don't lose 15 kilograms, you don't work all night, and your hand doesn't get twisted from work. You made up what you said at the Sergio Arboleda University, and I say this to you respectfully. So, based on what I'm piecing together here, if, like, the lie about the crooked hand, I don't know if it was specifically just in the article or if it was in the article and she was talking about that at the university, the Sergio Arboleda University, then yeah, it sounds like maybe she got an opportunity to work at the university before the articles came out. So maybe that means that someone in her friend group had connections and they were able to be all like, hey, I know this person who worked on The Boy and the Heron, why don't I bring them in? And then that gave her an opportunity to speak. I wonder if she got paid for it or if this was like purely an optics ego thing, because if she got paid for it, it's totally a grift. If it's like well, I guess it could be a blend, but like a solely optics ego thing is a very different matter. I'm very curious if she got paid. Interesting. And so like that sounds to me like she was playing up how injured she got so that she would have these smaller up and coming animators, illustrators, whatnot, the people who were taking her workshop effectively looking up to her and being all like, oh my god, she's so dedicated, she's amazing. And then she like, you know, veered into a bunch of people who actually did potentially have background knowledge of animation. And I imagine it probably set off alarm bells in their heads. But, you know, why would you assume that your university hired a grifter? Why would you assume that they hired a scam artist? It's the same thing in going to, like, Artist Alley and finding someone who's, like, tracing work or selling AI garbage or whatnot. You do, like, a double take because you expect the convention to look into that shit. You don't want to immediately call it out because there's that potential, like, oh, well, the convention people probably looked into it. In this case, it would be the university higher-ups must have looked into her. They must have seen that she was seen that she was legit. And oh yeah, so I don't need to worry about it. Like, I'm just, you know, seeing things that aren't there. Who knows how that works? How many drawings did you do in total for The Boy and the Heron? Approximately 200 or 300 drawings. 200 or 300 drawings. If 1 second of a scene of a movie has 24 drawings, that means that your participation in the movie was about 4 seconds. No, 200 or 300 drawings divided into different scenes. That means with the group, with the people who were there, they would tell me which backgrounds or illustrations to draw, and then they would assemble them all together there. The amount of work she alleged to have put into the film did not match up with her compensation, nor how she claimed to have since been excluded from the film's international credits. It painted a much broader picture of potential exploitation, which may have been what Geraldine was going for. And why aren't you credited as a director or co-director? Because I thought that you would have been almost right, don't you think? Well, come on, it's normal that they'd tell you that they'd want to work with you again because you made the entire movie. No, well, that was, let's say, more of a test. Because almost all of the other illustrators were already working for Studio Ghibli. Let's say me and just 3 other people were like the new kids, and we were the ones who worked the most. But I think it was more of a challenge or something experimental because in the end, I told Hayao Miyazaki, okay, I'll work on this, and then I'm out. And I mean, he even knew my name, and that was pretty incredible. I mean, this was definitely a challenge, like a test, and they took notice and they saw it. Was there any scene you were asked to do for the movie, but for one reason or another, it didn't make the final cut? Maybe because the movie was too long, or did everything that you did get used in the movie? No, everything I did was used. There were only 2 scenes that didn't make it, but that was because the movie was already too long. But in general, there were just 2 scenes that didn't make it into the movie. Everything I created was implemented in the film. How much money did you receive? How much did Studio Ghibli pay you? Well, approximately at the time I was receiving per month or per scene, what would be 1,200,000. For those unaware, 1 million Colombian pesos is equal to roughly 333 Canadian dollars, 232 United States dollars, 108 British pounds, 35,787 Japanese yen, or 47,064 Mexican pesos. Geraldine also does not clarify if this was per month or per scene. If she was paid per scene and Geraldine claimed to have worked on between 15 and 20 scenes total, then that would be 15 to 20 million Colombian pesos, 5,000 Canadian, 3,500 American, 2,800 pounds sterling, 551,000 Japanese yen, 71,187 Mexican pesos. Mind you, this was on a production that lasted 4 years. This is compounded by the fact that she claimed to have been injured during the production of this film. So how can you say that for just 2 drawings I wouldn't lose 15 kilograms, knowing that it was in the early morning, that it was constant constant stress because the next day Girl, are you bitching about drawing 2 frames? Knowing that it was in the early morning, that it was constant stress because the next day I had to do more work and I had to be a normal person. How can you say that, like, that's not losing 15 kilograms, that that's not losing weight, that that's not depressing, and that's not stressing? A person who has carpal tunnel syndrome. Even her outlook on the film itself and how she approached it changed between interviews. I imagine the pride you must have felt working with Studio Ghibli at a film like this, being the only Latin American or even Spanish speaker. It must have been significant, right? Well, the truth is, yes, it surprised me. I was like, who would think of looking for someone from the other side of the ocean, so to speak? So it was quite surprising. But it's also amazing because, let's say, it was a challenge. I didn't expect it, and it was a pretty big challenge for me. In many ways, it helped me a lot. Had you worked previously in animation with another studio or another advertising company, or was this the first time you were doing it? Yes, it was the first time. I mean, I've always illustrated and I've always done illustrations, but it's mostly been in a digital format. It's always been more like work or campaign related. But for animation itself, in the scope of what we're talking about, yes, it is the first time. Yes, I told the story, and let me put this into context as well. This project, I had done it for myself, like it was a personal project for me, as if it were just a regular job. So the opportunity came up, I did the work, and I kept it for myself. I told a couple of people, friends and close people I trusted, but unfortunately one of them, a friend, took the information and spread the news to a group of journalists. And when they started contacting me, they already had a base for the story and knew what had happened. You know what happened with this? A little white lie turned into a big lie. So you told some of your friends I participated in the movie El Niño y la Garza, right? Exactly. Your friends then told journalists a Colombian participated in a movie with the studio that just won a Golden Globe, right? Exactly. And the journalists called you. Exactly. And you had to keep up the lie, so to speak? Yes, totally. So the little lie, like a snowball, turned into a giant snowball, correct? Yes, exactly. Reading this out, the way that she tries to stick to the lie, like, even though she's admitted it here, it's like, yes, it was a lie. Like, it almost feels like she's going for the plausible deniability thing. Because, like, she's got the whole NDA. So, like, realistically speaking, the NDA would prevent her from talking about it in general. But you could, like, maybe do it's like, oh, well, I didn't tell people outside of my circle, they told it, and blah blah blah, possible deniability. But then she actually went on, like, the interviews and, like, did conferences and whatnot, so would that not violate the NDA? You would think this is all just, like, pretense so she could convince it to the people in her inner circle and be all like, yeah, I couldn't talk about it in the public. I can talk about it to you guys, but the NDA bars me from talking about it. And you actually did, like, a really bad thing and you hurt me by telling the media. Oh my god. Whoa. That's insane. Is that just me? Okay. Yet this is not a case of plausible deniability where someone with an active NDA and a large company working against them prevents them from benefiting from their work. Geraldine took credit for pivotal scenes within the film that, upon its release, could be easily fact-checked. I never imagined, not in a million years, that this scene was made by just one person, and much less that I'd be talking to her today. That completely blows my mind. It reminds me a lot of Studio 4C, which is more experimental with animation and everything, unlike Ghibli. I thought it was an entire team dedicated only for that, like the part with the earthquake on The Wind Rises, which was much more impactful and everything. I thought for sure that it was made by more than one person. In fact, this scene was done by one person, but it was not Geraldine Fernandez Ruiz. The key animator for the opening sequence of The Boy and the Heron was actually Shinya Ohira, who was, incidentally, also a key animator in The Wind Rises, the very movie that Keith Sith just cited. Shinya's work is especially recognizable because of how abstract it is, as well as how he plays with impact and gravity, allowing the action of a scene to distort the character models as needed. However, Geraldine taking credit for Ohira's work is not something that came out of nowhere. In fact, it's rather in keeping with her patterns, given that it became apparent that she had been taking credit for the work of others for quite some time. Geraldine, there are also other questions regarding the illustrations in your portfolio. People on social media claim that some of these are plagiarized, and that they've even pointed out who the real authors are. What do you say about this? I've clarified this several times. Yes, it's an older portfolio, different from the new one, and I've already spoken to the illustrators and explained everything. Fortunately, unlike all the people who have been attacking me, at least they understood. They talked about it, and they didn't even get angry. I spoke directly with them, and unlike all the people who have been throwing things at me, including this here, the conversation has been quite pleasant. I apologize to them, but the rest of the work that appears in the portfolio is mine. So you mean to tell me that the portfolio was old enough that you didn't remember that you had just, what, accidentally taken credit for a bunch of work that blatantly wasn't your own, to such an extent that you weren't even aware those pieces were present and couldn't logically parse out that you hadn't actually drawn them, but also that you were somehow still able to track down and contact the artists that you had been plagiarizing in a day, and they were just super fine with you having done that? You know, maybe I've got trust issues, but for some reason, I don't believe her. This also then begs the question as to how much longer that would have gone on had Geraldine not overstepped and flown too close to the sun. How long was she using that portfolio of stolen work? While recording, I questioned how something like that might happen, and the first thought that came to mind was that maybe this was a college portfolio that hadn't been updated in years. I could totally see a college kid doing that and forgetting that they'd done that years later if they hadn't touched that portfolio for a while. But also, I didn't plagiarize work in college, so I don't know if that's something you would remember doing. Do people who cheat in school remember the specifics of their cheating, or just that they did it?
And don't underestimate the importance of body language.
One thing that I found to be particularly interesting while looking into this situation that might be worth exploring was Geraldine's body language between interviews. Because while you couldn't see her in the Blue Radio interview, you could see her in the Keith Sith and Yazta interviews. The Yazta interview, as far as I can tell, happening after the Keith Sith one because, based on the available clips, it appears that Yazta pushes back on a lot more of her claims. When Keith Sith accepts her narrative that she was the artist behind the fire sequence in the film, you can see the smile on her face and how she turns away from the camera. There's a slight shake to the camera that initially made me believe this was her shoulders moving and that was her giggling, but it almost looks more like a blush reaction, doesn't it? Like she's getting an emotional rush similar to what one experiences when they are genuinely complimented on something that they've done. And I denote this because obviously I don't think that she's a good enough actress to fake this sort of reaction. She does look like she's laughing a bit later though, before she literally leans into the conversation. Geraldine goes on one of her lies about working on the film, leaning back and crossing her arms in a defensive or pensive gesture, like she's waiting to see if Keith accepts the presented narrative, and when he does, she leans in again, eager to further engage with the conversation and the narrative because Keith Sith isn't pushing back. Switch over to the Yazta interview, and he doesn't visually seem like he believes what she's telling him, which forces her to think harder about the construction of the narrative that she's trying to sell. There are parts of the conversation where Yazta doesn't even look at her while she's answering him, not because he's looking at a screen like Keith Sith was, but because he's looking down and disengaging from the conversation. He's showcasing to her that he's not interested, that he's not buying it. By this interview, she's been forced to admit that her name doesn't appear in the credits, and now that she is broadly included under the umbrella supporting studio of UFO Table, saying that while her name doesn't directly appear, her emotional high from being involved was essentially what caused her to inflate the nature of her role in the film when talking about it, and that she did believe that she would be in the credits. But then, you know, is your excuse for taking credits for O'Hara's animation really going to be, I was too excited? When Yazta asks if she can showcase some of the work she did for the studio production to prove her involvement, she says that she can't. Something that, I guess, changed since the Sergio Arboleda workshop and the Keith Sith interview where she was directly taking credit for specific scenes. Notice how she's leaning back in her chair at this line of questioning. Look at her facial expression. It's so different and interesting that I couldn't not bring it up. Based on what I've seen, Geraldine's art, to use unconventional but socially understandable terminology if a tad lacking in nuance, isn't bad like one would expect. In the interview with streamer Yazta, she showed off some of her artwork. Provided this work isn't also plagiarized, it's decent enough. Certainly not Ghibli quality, but not the worst thing in the world. Personally, I'd maybe say that she could work on her traditional coloring a little more, but I'm not exactly one to criticize in that regard. My skills are rather lacking in that department as well. Her pieces based on more realistic proportions aren't bad. Her cartoon character designs are pretty great, actually. Her anime style attempts are also quite good. Her fantasy dragons are a little simplistic and unrefined, but not awful. They're, again, about as good as I'd be able to make. But then there are also small things that give me pause, like how on some pieces, her grasp on how to layer hair is quite lacking, whereas others appear to be near perfect recreations of the style that she's going for. Replication is a skill that an artist generally needs to train, and it's much harder to do if you don't have a grasp of the basics. If there's a particular look to the art that you struggle to accomplish on your own, then any instance where you require that skill to replicate something else, and the replication is going to be flawed around those specific limitations. Geraldine showing an almost perfect replication of Jim Hawkins from Treasure Planet, immediately followed by a piece of a girl tying back her hair that looks like something I drew when I was 15, showcases a very notable disparity in the bar of quality for her alleged work. TLDR translation, I think it's very likely that some of these may have also been plagiarized. I also find it interesting that a part of Geraldine's lie was that she attended a course in Tokyo where she was told that her artwork shared a lot of similarities with the Ghibli style. Yet here we have a direct comparison in the form of a scene from a Ghibli movie, Spirited Away, that she has drawn, which allows us to see that she doesn't draw in the traditionally understood Studio Ghibli style.
I feel very attacked! Relax.
She claims that not only did she get to interact with Hayao Miyazaki on at least 3 occasions, something that she, of course, provided no actual evidence of, but also that he had affectionately nicknamed her the Colombian, which, maybe it's just me, but the Colombian sounds like a moniker you grant to an assassin or a dealer of illicit substances because they're so elusive and mysterious that they've literally never given you anything else to work with. People don't call me the tentacle monster. Well, actually, someone might. Remember when I said that Geraldine claimed to have signed an NDA before ever working on the film? Well, one of the other claims attached to that was that this was one of 3 times that she met Hayao Miyazaki, stating that they met once at the beginning when she signed her contract, again when the film was 50% complete, and then once more as things were wrapping up. In her interview with Blue Radio, she claimed that she found the NDA to be suspicious, without really expanding on it much beyond that. What Geraldine was implying here is that she had been preyed upon by Studio Ghibli, that it was their fault that her name didn't appear in the credits. By stating that Hayao Miyazaki was even present when her contract was signed, she was also kinda implicating him in the alleged exploitation of herself as an artist. You can probably imagine why a bunch of animation buffs took offense to her simultaneously smearing the name of the man who's been affectionately nicknamed the Japanese Walt Disney, whilst also trying to take credit for his retirement film. Because let's not beat around the bush. Even beyond the grift, that is what she did. She propped herself up as an artist who was injured while creating potentially 30 minutes of animated content for a globally renowned studio that denied her any accreditation when the film was completed through a predatory NDA, and that the director knew of her existence and her role in that production. Frankly, I think it would be impossible for Miyazaki to not know the name of the woman who animated 25,000 frames in a 1.5-hour film. So she is implicating him in the exploitation she's subtly framing herself as the victim of. That was something that I noticed while looking through the interviews, that for every issue people had with Geraldine's actions in this regard, and despite this entire situation being the result of a series of deliberate lies that she told to alter people's perceptions of her, she was always ready and willing to frame herself as a victim. When brought into the Blue Radio interview, she was very keen to victimize herself in the face of the online criticism that she'd been on the receiving end of. When asked about the consequences that she was facing as a result of her actions, despite her job being at risk, she brought up the alleged harassment again. How have these last few hours been for you, Geraldine? Chaotic. I've had several breakdowns. I haven't slept, as I mentioned. I've been attacked through my cell phone. Even though I turned it off and everything, all night long it's been messages. I don't know who, well, I do know who. They leaked my phone number and it's been a constant attack. Yesterday, I felt like they reached my front door. I practically can't even leave right now. I can't even look around without feeling like I'm going to be attacked. And when asked what she regretted about the whole situation, everything that she cited were actions that other people had taken that she framed as a deliberate slight against her, which included the friend who brought it to the media, a person who, mind you, probably thought that they were helping her to some degree. What do you regret at this moment? About telling friends or acquaintances that you worked on some scenes or in the production of the film. One of the bolder ones communicated with the media, and so to speak, I got caught up in this whole mess. I regret studying with colleagues and being in a world of colleagues where, excuse my language, the hate and envy that they carry towards you and they just want to attack you, who started all of this on social media. Yes, and I accept my mistake, and I've been telling you from the beginning that I'm accepting my mistake and explaining understanding how I'm handling it. But what I also regret is that even though I'm accepting my mistake, I regret that people have crossed my path whose only intention is to cause me harm. I could end up hurting myself and no one would care. She even had excuses for the classes that she claimed to have taken at Tokyo University not existing. You've mentioned that you had studied or done some type of studies at a university in Tokyo, but through social media and various media outlets, it has been pointed out that the studies you claim to have completed don't exist as such, and that the educational center where you say you studied doesn't even exist. Can you clarify this situation? Well, the University of Tokyo has different faculties, and the faculty where my specialty is the Faculty of Science and Technology, because they do applications, they make websites and all that. I studied new technologies in that facility, and within that there is a specialization in contemporary illustration. Oh, the university had different faculties, and I was in one of those. Okay, but if the course doesn't exist, then the course doesn't exist. Frankly, if it did exist and she had taken it, bereft of any ability to prove her involvement with the alleged NDA hanging over her head, that would have been the easiest thing to prove. If she'd been on a scholarship and graduated from that course, then she should have a record of doing so. Studio Ghibli can't stop her from showcasing that she attended university. The fact that she can't prove something so simple speaks volumes. Not to mention the whole, I only speak basic Japanese, but also apparently that's enough to take a technologies course in a Japanese university. Press X to doubt. Geraldine made every attempt to skirt around the very notion that she had been lying, even going so far as to say that she didn't know the difference between lying and exaggerating, so she couldn't be sure if her actions were one or the other. Geraldine, I beg you to forgive this questioning, but did you lie? No. Exaggerating is not the same as lying. It's a way of saying you told a little white lie or a big lie. Well, I'm not sure how it could be determined, like the meaning, but I don't know if exaggerating is the same as lying. However, I am here to clarify. Sure, I could see it being insanely distressing if you were telling the truth and nobody believed you, and I would expect a person in that scenario to reaffirm their narrative, but the fact that she expressly took credit for work that could be proven to have been made by other people means that she wasn't telling the truth. How have these last few hours been for you, Geraldine? Chaotic. I've had several breakdowns. I haven't slept, as I mentioned. You know what, this is, if she is telling the truth about like the amount of backlash she was getting, because like this does seem like a regular thing, or like a big thing, and for somebody who like maybe isn't online a lot, this would seem like, imagine she has like maybe 30 to 1,000 subscribers, right? Or not subscribers, but like followers on Twitter. She's maybe getting like maximum, 10 engagements or something. I don't actually know how that works. But like then all of a sudden her mentions are like flooding in with people talking about like, oh my god, can you believe she lied about this thing? And they're picking apart her portfolio, which she's been like comfortable sitting on for years, because I don't know, like she just got used to not having people know enough to call her out, or not being willing to call her out on that. And then all of a sudden there's this influx. So like the way that must have like shattered her worldview. Maybe not shattered her worldview is the correct terminology, but like she had gotten so comfortable in like a very specific mindset. I don't know, the interviews are throwing me off. Maybe she thought the interview, you know what, she probably thought the interviews would fix it. What am I talking about? Okay. And then she realized it wasn't gonna work. That's I feel bad for her, but why would you lie about? Heads up, guys. I was instrumental in the creation of Stuart Gordon's movie Re-Animator. I gave him all of his best ideas. It was my idea to make the reagent green. It doesn't matter that I wasn't born and that I feasibly had no way of being there. I was there. Promise you. I was there. Making up lies requires mental energy, so given that Geraldine also claimed to be facing so much harassment and criticism, I'm curious to know if that, coupled with the continuous lies, drained her over the course of these few days. Maybe that's then why it didn't last much longer.
I've made a severe and continuous lapse in my judgment.
On January 17th, 2024, after she'd been properly dragged through the mud online and through news outlets retracting their original articles on her, Geraldine finally decided that it was time to come clean and issue an apology. Geraldine's apology letter. I alert the public, the media, my friends, and my family that I never participated in the illustration and design of the film The Boy and the Heron, directed by Hayao Miyazaki. Everything that happened was the result of a bad faith exercise that I now recognize and for which I am sorry. My love and admiration for illustration and my profession as a graphic designer led me to make comments in closed circles about working as an illustrator in some scenes. I recognize that was a mistake. The digital press contacted me, and from there, everything went viral, a situation that was far beyond my expectations and which placed me in the eye of a hurricane in front of the most important media in the country, influencers, and colleagues. I acknowledge that the situation got out of hand, and it became increasingly difficult to retract my comments, which had a negative impact on my friends, family, colleagues, bosses, coworkers, and society in general. Today, after exhaustive reflection and advice seeking, I draw on my inner strength to address you and say that it's time for the truth to come to light, that everyone deserves to know. The truth frees us. This experience would have an impact on anyone. I'm aware of this, especially when the media did not act with rigor to verify the sources, which took me by surprise. I did not have the maturity to recant, and felt that I had to continue with the story that I had participated in the production. I reiterate that I feel remorse and express my apologies. I appreciate the support of some internet users, bosses, friends, family, and the company to which I am linked. They have all provided moral support and strength at this time, for which I am very grateful. I would have liked to go viral for something real, but today we wake in a country with important issues that affect the integrity and daily life of all Colombians, but those stories don't become viral. I apologize 1,000 times for everything that has happened. From now on, I will work hard so that my professional talent as a designer precedes me. I believe this is the formula to follow, away from controversies, with loyalty, simplicity, humility, kindness, and love for my profession. Thank you for listening. Geraldine Fernandez. I can only imagine what was going on behind the scenes to prompt her to do this, given that up until this point she was still sticking to her story, albeit with small caveats that gave her plausible deniability. I wonder if it maybe had something to do with the fact that it was tied to both her real name and her job, something that she lost after this whole situation. So much for the "my bosses and coworkers have been supportive" thing. Oh, to have been a Spanish-speaking fly on the wall in that family meeting. Everything that happened was the result of a bad faith exercise that I now recognize and for which I am sorry. That you now recognize. Did you not recognize that you were lying? Bad faith sort of implies that you did. Before I watched the Blue Radio interview, I had a sneaking suspicion that Geraldine may have told this lie to people in her inner circles because she felt self-conscious about her own accomplishments. Perhaps she needed to show up someone else in the moment, maybe a family member had an opportunity but she had to conflate her resume to qualify for it, maybe she needed a way to prove her value as an artist to her family, or maybe people in her life were fans of Studio Ghibli works and she wanted them to be jealous of or idolize her. Whatever the reason, I surmised that this was a story she told to someone that she was close to, and that person carried it outside of the scope of her influence where she could no longer control the narrative. The Blue Radio interview essentially confirmed that. When Fernandez was asked what she regretted about this entire experience, she clarified that she had told a few friends about how she was included as a part of the production staff in The Boy and the Heron, and that it was one of those friends who carried it to the media. It may also be within the realm of possibility that the workshop Geraldine did at Sergio Arboleda University was an opportunity accrued through that lie. So perhaps someone she knew had connections to the university, they were looking for an animator to run a workshop, asked Geraldine if she could recommend anyone, and she propped herself up as a possibility, citing having worked on a Ghibli film to boost her standing. While this is only speculation, given that she claimed that she was only sharing this with close friends behind closed doors, I can't imagine that she was sharing it on social media at the time, which leads me to believe that the university heard of her through word of mouth, as opposed to something like a LinkedIn portfolio. My love and admiration for both illustration and my profession as a graphic designer led me to make comments in closed circles about working as an illustrator in some scenes. That's an interesting way to phrase "I lied," not to mention the assertion that it was her profession as a graphic designer that led her to making them. You know, passion is one thing. I can understand passion. I can understand a desperate need to be a part of the thing that you love. I surmise that most people can relate to that to some degree. However, let's not mince words. Geraldine's job as a graphic designer did not cause her to lie about this. And if if I give her the benefit of the doubt in accepting that it did, then I would argue that's even worse. The lie being the result of her job would mean that she was expressly lying in order to boost her resume, meaning Geraldine was taking potential jobs away from people who had actually done what she was claiming to, meaning she was potentially getting paid to prop up the work of other artists, point to it, and say, "I did that." I would argue that this is very much worse than it simply being a matter of ego and insecurity. I recognize that was a mistake. Because you got caught. I would like to point out that at no point in this apology does she mention the plagiarized work in her portfolio. It's also interesting that she says, "I acknowledge that the situation got out of hand," and not, "I apologize for the situation getting out of hand." But maybe that's just me, could also simply be a bad translation. "This experience would have an impact on anyone. I'm aware of this." What a subtle way of drawing attention back to the idea that you were a victim because people rightfully called you out for lying and trying to profit off of the works of other artists. "Especially when the media did not act with rigor to verify the sources, which took me by surprise. I did not have the maturity to recant and felt I had to continue with the story that I had participated in the production." This little bit is interesting, and in fairness, it could just be the result of a less than optimal translation. But I find it amusing that she calls out how the media didn't fact-check her, given that she doesn't call out Sergio Arboleda University for not vetting her. Why might this be? Well, because the media not fact-checking her led to this huge blowout, whereas Sergio Arboleda not vetting her led to a job opportunity. She doesn't call out the university because their laziness benefited her. I would also like to point out that it may have been the fact that she did the workshop at Sergio Arboleda that led to the lackluster investigative journalism, because there was the assumption that the university had already done its due diligence in vetting her credentials. Beyond that, this is not the first time something like this has happened. I've seen news reports about people with some life-threatening disease that is revealed to have all been a scam for money months later, though it could definitely be said that this case would have been far easier to check. Furthermore, if she expected to be fact-checked by the media when she allowed that first article, you mean to tell me that you had your suspicions that they were going to fact-check you and cancel the production of the article because you lied, but you had the nerve to waste their time anyways? You let them follow you around your place of work with a camera and interview your boss and coworker. You mean to tell me you didn't think there was going to be an issue with that? You just felt entirely comfortable wasting that camera crew's time? Even if she had assumed that they were going to fact-check her and call out her lie, initially I surmised that the news outlet would recognize that she was lying and simply drop the article and ghost her without any sort of direct confrontation. Taking that into consideration, I'm now wondering if she's maybe a little bit salty that it didn't play out that way. She would have been relying on the option where people figured out that she was lying, but basically nobody called her out on it, as opposed to the whole thing going viral and hundreds of thousands of people across Colombia and the internet at large knowing that she's a liar. Like, yeah, Geraldine, I could definitely see that being the better outcome. For you. Not to mention the fact that she doubled down multiple times. People did start questioning what she claimed, and rather than coming forward and admitting to it, she made up more lies to cover up the first. Why would we not assume that she would have just done that if the original articles had questioned her story? You know, if the first article had asked, "Hey, why can't we find a record of you in the available movie credits?" would she have whipped out the NDA excuse and claimed that the credits weren't finished? Could you imagine if she'd gone in to give an interview for that first article, they did their fact-checking, and when the article was released, it was literally just calling her out in the local paper for lying to them? No, of course you can't, because that wouldn't happen, and that's what she was counting on. She was counting on being found out by the person writing the article so that it would quietly go away and she would never face any consequences for the lie. Should anyone in her inner circle ever bring up, "Oh, what happened to that article they were going to write about you?" she could just play dumb or make up some new lie about how the article got pushed aside for a bigger story, in turn garnering sympathy for her accomplishments going unacknowledged. While I speculated this initially, it actually makes much more sense that the article might then pivot to focus on the Sergio Arboleda University workshop. I can't see a news outlet calling out some random woman for lying to her friends, but I can certainly see them writing an article about a grifter who was lying about her resume to get conference jobs where she's supposed to be teaching up-and-coming animators about an industry that she isn't a part of. Don't get it twisted, both the news media and the university should have vetted this woman. Geraldine was very much coasting on their ignorance and trust. Sure, she's responsible for telling telling the lies, but investigative journalism is a thing for a reason. That reason being that people often lie to make themselves or their accomplishments seem more impressive. The story was notable because it was a local Colombian woman working on a film that had just won a Golden Globe. Obviously, you want to believe that something like that is true, but it can't be discounted that it's an opportunity that bad actors would readily take advantage of. I could understand them not recognizing the stolen work in her portfolio because I can't imagine they browse DeviantArt all that often, but to not even question why she wasn't included in the credits was just negligent and naive. Two words that shouldn't be a part of media reporting. So while I think it's worth criticizing the media outlets that perpetuated her narrative, it does not make sense for Fernandez herself to be the one doing it. If you want to argue that it's a part of their job to fact-check the stories brought to them and that's why it falls on them in particular, I think that's a perfectly valid viewpoint. But I must then remind everyone that Geraldine Fernandez was working as a graphic designer and therefore should not have been plagiarizing and taking credit for the work of other artists, because creating those works herself is a part of her job.
I would have liked to go viral for something real, but today we wake in a country with important stories that affect the integrity and daily life of all Colombians. But these stories don't become viral.
Girl, shut up! Again, maybe the product of a bad translation, but it's interesting that a line like this is included in her apology, because this is a not-so-subtle means of shaming people for paying attention to her antics and not paying attention to more important things in the world.
There are starving kids in insert country here. Why are you focusing on some random woman lying about being an animator?
Gee, I don't know, Geraldine. Maybe because it's more entertaining than hyper-focusing on all of the ways the world sucks? Because it's cathartic to see someone lying to make themselves seem more accomplished get called out for it? The hilarious thing is that this could easily be turned on her. If there were more important things impacting the lives of Colombians, why did you make up a lie about working on The Boy and the Heron to make yourself seem like a big shot? Why weren't you using your 15 seconds of fame to draw attention to these stories? You have the gall to go at the wider audience for potentially not even being aware of these issues when you couldn't be bothered to inform people of them when you had the opportunity? When all of this came about because you felt the need to inflate your resume and take credit for things to artificially boost your accomplishments? Geraldine was in this situation because she felt the need to draw attention to herself for things that she didn't do, and now she's blaming people for their attention being on her. Now, something worth considering here is that the Japanese animation industry does have a bad track record of working their animators for much longer than they should, and Ghibli itself is no stranger to allegations of this nature. Remember how Geraldine claimed that she developed a crooked hand and lost 15 kilograms from the grueling hours of work expected from her? Could this have been a means of her trying to draw attention to the unreasonable work hours and expectations placed on Japanese animators? Without seeing how Geraldine's original interview was recorded, it's hard to say. Maybe she expressly brought up the issue and it was cut from the article for one reason or another during the editing process. Maybe this could have been the important subject affecting people that nobody was paying attention to. Except she specifically made reference to it being the issues that affect the daily lives of Colombians that she was talking about, so yeah, I'm personally gonna say probably not on that one. You know, maybe it's just me, but this doesn't seem entirely sincere. Not to mention the whole, I would have liked to go viral for something real bit. You could have gone viral for something real, had you actually done something real. Lying about working on The Boy and the Heron was your choice. You don't get to lament how you didn't go viral for the thing you wanted to go viral for. Maybe actually do something of note rather than taking credit for the hard work of others and then bitching that nobody's paying attention to your real accomplishments when you get called out for it. Because remember guys, she was also discovered to have been using other people's work in her portfolio. So it wasn't just animation in a Studio Ghibli movie that she was taking credit for. That also tells me that this was probably a much longer problem with her, because as far as I'm aware, she didn't make the portfolio specifically to back up the idea that she could produce Ghibli quality work. It was her online work portfolio, something that she said was quite old, meaning that she was potentially stealing from others long before she told this lie, and she was potentially doing it to get jobs. This was something that she had been doing for a while and had likely gotten used to getting away with. Honestly, if she'd been smarter, she could have turned this around on the media. She could have claimed that this was all a ploy to see if they would actually fact-check her claims, and after they didn't, to then see how long it would take before somebody actually did. Commendable that she didn't go that route, I suppose, especially given that the university workshop meant that it wouldn't have worked anyways, but it is interesting that she denotes her lacking maturity in being able to fess up at first, given that it is very immature for her to pass off the blame onto these media outlets and the netizens that recognized that what she was claiming was a lie, as if it was their fault that she went viral. Fact of the matter is, she went viral because she lied. People would not have cared about her if they hadn't done a confused double take looking at the article and sent it off to their animator and anime friends to get their perspectives. Is it also their fault that she was plagiarizing the artwork of others and claiming it as her own on her portfolio website? Even when she admitted to the fact that she was lying to El Heraldo, she still tried to downplay her actions, saying, "I worked on a couple of scenes from The Boy and the Heron. I exaggerated. It is not real that I made the 25,000 frames alone. It was a team effort. I made 200. While it would be an exaggeration to inflate 200 to 25,000 frames, comparable to exaggerating the length of a sardine into that of an oarfish, that is not what she did. An exaggeration of her involvement in the film requires involvement in the film. She was not involved in any way, shape, or form in the production of The Boy and the Heron. She did not exaggerate, she lied. Do I think that it's possible for someone to lie and continue to lie simply by virtue of them immaturely wanting to seem more accomplished than they are without there being some level of maliciousness behind it? Of course I do. Objectively speaking, some people lie without thinking about it, and for those who have been doing it for a long time without pushback, as I suspect with Geraldine given her portfolio, they do tend to get used to it. They potentially lose out on some level of emotional maturity that comes with being forced to acknowledge that they were lying in the first place, whether that be to the people that they lied to or even themselves. In other cases, it's simply easier or more comforting to exist within a fantasy of their own making. If the fantasy itself isn't possible, then a lie that grants them some of the same social benefits could suffice. Geraldine likely lied about working on The Boy and the Heron because it gave the impression that she was much more accomplished within her social circles. I hesitate to specifically call it a white lie, but without broader context, it seems harmless. But again, then my mind is drawn back to the fact that she had been taking credit for other people's work for an extended period of time, and that work being a part of her personal portfolio tells me that this was not exclusively limited to her social circles, but was actually a calculated effort to bring her more job opportunities, as we saw with Sergio Arboleda University. After all, to a layperson who doesn't know anything about the animation industry but who is looking for an accomplished graphic designer, an affordable local artist who worked on an award-winning movie seems like a very appealing prospect. Or this could have been a cheap method of inflating her accomplishments to justify charging more for her work. I could read into Geraldine's lie as a harmless, immature gesture, simply the byproduct of an insecure woman seeking validation. A one-off mistake that quickly got out of control. I'm sure that she would be very appreciative of that read, but I also believe that this is because it falls into her narrative. She wants people to believe that she made an immature mistake, to forget that she was dishonestly using the works of others to inflate her own artistic resume, and that she had been doing it long before her claim about working on The Boy and the Heron. Realistically speaking, it's possible that such an exaggerated and ridiculous lie came about because she was used to doing it, which then makes me question, outside of people recognizing this within her portfolio, how many more lies like this were hidden beneath the surface that we simply don't have a record of. If Geraldine was willing to steal artwork from people on DeviantArt and take credit for it as a part of her portfolio, who's to say that she didn't do this within the workplace? How many times was she potentially struggling with a piece for a client and just grabbed something off of DeviantArt or Pinterest to pass off as her own? If I was her ex-boss, I'd be double-checking literally everything that she ever made for them.
I apologize 1,000 times for everything that has happened.
Interesting wording. Seems like another means of her skirting around the fact that everything happened as a result of her actions, but maybe that's just me. On the one hand, I feel bad for Geraldine, because I know that she was fired as a result of this whole debacle, and I imagine that the controversy then made it more difficult to find a new job. Yet on the other hand, if you're in an artistic profession and found to be taking credit for the works of others to boost your resume and accrue more job opportunities, you should be fired. Not only is your resume not indicative of the quality of work that you're capable of producing, but also your word on the matter can't even be trusted.
So long, my friend.
So what has been going on with Geraldine Fernandez since all of this went down? Has she learned her lesson and stopped trying to grift off of the works of others? In fairness, I imagine that would be quite difficult at that point, given that any potential new employer could just Google her. Truthfully, I don't know. And I don't care. After she admitted to it being a lie and deactivated her social accounts, the news and broadcast media kinda stopped caring about her and moved on to different things. I don't know if she ever returned to social media, and frankly, I don't really feel like tracking down this random Colombian woman who's probably just trying to move on with her life. If she ever does return to social media, it's perhaps worth her followers being aware that she had this habit in the past, so that they can have the context for if she ever does it again, maybe keep an eye out and keep her honest if they see her slipping back into that habit. But me personally, I don't really care enough. I kinda just view it as a pretty apt internet example of, hey kids, this is why you don't lie on your resume. At 30 years old, Geraldine definitely knew better than to take credit for someone else's work. She's smart enough to recognize the consequences of doing multiple interviews claiming to be a part of a production that she never touched, as well as what sort of message that would send to a person's employer when you get them involved in your lie and make them look like a fool on national television. I don't think I should feel bad for this woman losing her job. If your job finds out that you've been lying to them, I think getting fired is a pretty reasonable expectation. However, I do feel bad for the woman, because in any instance where the harassment that she claimed to have been facing was real, her previous track record of lying, especially when used to frame herself as a victim, probably meant that nobody actually believed her, which is sad, if true. Hopefully the fact that she was lying being exposed didn't burn down too many bridges in her home life. I'd imagine whatever friend took it to the media and then got retroactively blamed for the whirlpool of bad decisions she found herself in probably wouldn't be too pleased with her, nor whoever may have gotten her that university workshop opportunity, and I'm not entirely sure how successful she's going to be in any job that requires a portfolio because, you know, for a while there's going to be that lingering question of whether the work is all hers. Beyond that, I hope she's got some time to work on her art. With a little practice and dedication, maybe one day she will be as good as she wants to be. Maybe at some point in the future, she'll be able to draw a scene from The Boy and the Heron, and her replication and knowledge of the craft will be so good that we won't even be able to tell the difference between them. Until that time, it appears that Geraldine has returned to her concept of the real world, having gone through her trials of accepting the truth, in that her own attempt to build her world was tainted by her own desires and drawbacks, the fantasy of a paradise of her own creation crumbling to pieces behind her. Thrust back into a world where she has to accept the loss of her narrative and her role in creating it, what sort of future will Geraldine Fernandez Ruiz walk into? How will she live? Only time can tell, and that's not something that we are privy to. Oh my god, it is The Boy and the Heron! And that was the tale of Geraldine Fernandez Ruiz in La Niña y la Farsa. What did you guys think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you maybe do something similar to Fernandez when you were younger? And are you now counting yourself super lucky that your situation didn't blow up to the extremes of national radio? I mean, I presume as much. How many of you guys have been on the radio? Actually, have any of you guys lied on your resume before? How did that play out for you? Any fun or silly stories there? Let me know. This video was actually planned for much later, but I had a wee bit of a surge of I want to talk about this woman lately, and finished up the script a lot sooner than I thought I would, so it actually ended up coming out ahead of 2 other videos I was working on, and almost finished. Again, big thank you to Say for translating the interview segments for me. That also played a huge role in my ability to finish the script ahead of expectations. Go check out their work, it's absolutely gorgeous. I also apologize, there's no fan art feature today. I'm having some issues behind the scenes with the email, as well as personal life stuff that I'm not gonna get into because nobody cares. Frankly, I just need to get this video finished so that my brain can stop hyperfixating and focus on other things. While I'm sorting things out, there might be a couple other videos of that ilk, we'll see. Still sort of figuring myself out there. Anyways, I've been your local tentacle monster. We've now reached the end of the video, and oh yeah, remember, I did Re-Animator. That was me. I am Herbert West. Overdose! You get so many cracks because I'm trying something new and I'm recording this video in parts instead of just 1 2-hour record session, which, you know what, maybe that's better. Oh, I don't have water, I only have milk tea and soda. On January 2017, And I think I do need water. Damn it. I was doing so well. Alright, goes to show I can go for 12 minutes without water. I can go 12 minutes without being moist. Such is the life of a mollusk. Oh,
We love it when it's leg day.
on January 15th, Julieta Colas posted on... I definitely said that name wrong. Julieta Colas. Oh, I love it, but I can get the legs. One day I'll get both of them. I swear to God, it'll happen. It'll happen. Oh, I don't have any water. Shit. Okay, now I do have water. Is it true that you drew 25,000... Literally the first line. Oh my God, kill me. Geraldine, did you give a conference at the Sergio Arboleda University. 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 Geraldine, did you give a conference at the Fuck. I so thought that was gonna work. Geraldine, did you give a conference at the Sergio Arboleda University about your experience in the movie The Boy and the Heron? Fuck you! Gotcha! Bitch!
Yes, and I'm not saying this because...
Oh, fuck. If she was paid per scene, and Geraldine claimed to have worked on between 15 and 20 frames... 20 scenes. It's not frames. It's scenes. It's scenes. You stupid bitch.